Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the 6-5 podcast, episode 242. Sorry we missed you last week. It wasn't without the best of intent, but Pat had a tryptophan hangover. He ate so much turkey that he couldn't get on that morning. Like, I was there, I was ready, I was waiting, I was dressed, I was in, my best garb, and Pat was like, I can't do it. I ate too much turkey. No, I'm just kidding. But hope everybody's well. It's been a busy week. In fact, it's been a crazy week, a chaotic week, a nutso week in tech. Not only did we go to AWS reInvent, which in itself is nutty, but on Monday, we all woke up to the same crazy, unexpected message that the CEO, or former CEO now of Intel, Pat Gelsinger, had left the company. So that threw a wrench in our week. But Pat, best hour of every week for me is the hour we sit down and do this podcast. How the heck are you, buddy? I feel like I haven't seen you in minutes.
No, I know it's great. And there's nothing like hopping on the pod and immediately getting thrown under the bus for Thanksgiving.
It's just the tryptophan, man. Nobody can prevent that.
Appreciate that.
You upset about that? Is this going to affect your ability to perform today?
There's nothing that affects my ability to perform. And as I said in the green room run up on this, let's effing cook. Let's go. Let's jump into this thing.
All right. Well, first of all, before we do jump in, we got a really great show. We're going to talk Amazon. We're going to talk about Intel and what happened there. There was a lot of earnings this week. It's like, I know we have that earnings palooza period, Pat, but
yeah,
this week was crazy too. Pure Storage, Salesforce, Synopsys, Marvell, HPE all had earnings this week. We're going to hit all of those. We're going to, of course, start off. We're going to talk about AWS reInvent, which, by the way, it could be a show in itself. You're going to have to check out all the other 6-5 covers because we did a bunch of episodes there. They're going to be coming out live. We were there. Our team was there. I think there was like 30 people across our firms that were at this show this week. So that was great as well. Now, before we do proceed, reminder, everybody, this show is for information and entertainment purposes only. So while we will be talking Stop it. While we will be talking about publicly traded companies, please do not take anything that we say as investment advice, even though it will be great. Pat Moorhead, when I host the show, I never call my own number first, but I want to throw you under the bus for that too. But let's talk about AWS reInvent because there was so much there, and no matter how much you talk, there's going to be so much more to talk about.
Yeah, 4 days. Listen, I like to spend max 2 days at an event. Spent 2 full days. We were in on Monday morning and left Thursday evening. Landed about 8 o'clock at night, and we all kept ourselves busy. AWS kept us busy. Their ecosystem kept us busy as well. There were literally hundreds of announcements boiled into across 4 days. The main keynote was literally 3 hours long. So yeah, let's try to boil this down. To me, there were 6 announcements that I want to dive into, but macro point is the perception is that AWS is behind in enterprise generative AI. We can debate that. We can discuss it. We have on prior shows. But I just want to jump into the announcements here, and maybe we can wrap this up. Maybe we'll go back and forth on this. But I'd love to start off with the silicon, but I shouldn't. So here were the top announcements for me. So first of all, SageMaker, which is Amazon's end-to-end machine learning developer tool, they integrated data into the pipeline. And this is a big deal. It's all about simplicity. They created called SageMaker Unified Studio. They added a lakehouse and tools like SageMaker Catalog for data governance. That's huge. The next one they did is Q Developer. So think of Q Developer as sorry, I didn't move it here. Hang on a sec. Q Developer, think of that as Copilot. Think about that as your chatbot, your base for agents. But 3 announcements that I just thought were super cool were essentially code conversion and setting conversion to move you off of VMware. That was one. Super interesting that the prior week, AWS did an announcement with VMware, mainframe, and then going from Windows to Linux. You and I sat down with the general manager and the leader of that group, asked him some very hard questions. We talked about customers, the reality. I thought his answers were really good, right? You and I have both seen these transition tools before, and quite frankly, they haven't been that good. The interesting part is I love the openness, which was, hey, this isn't one button push yet. And whether it's VMware, mainframe, or Windows environments, these all go through systems integrators. So I thought that was, but I do fundamentally believe if there were a great use for generative AI, it's these transition tools. Let me dive into chips. So first announcement, there's nothing new about Graviton. Graviton has been out for a while, but what was new and what was astounding was that 50% of all new compute instance capabilities, not in the number of announcements, but the number of chips is Graviton. Okay, so that means 50% of what's coming in the back door of their data center is ARM-based Graviton and not x86 Intel or AMD. That is phenomenal. I've chronicled this Graviton since it was Nitro, right? Graviton 1 was actually a Nitro card, but now you've got 2-socket capabilities. You have scale up, you have scale out, and you have literally every type of workload with high performance storage that you can do on it. And I think they even said that I think it was nearly every customer that they have they're doing some sort of thing with Graviton. That's amazing. And I really think this puts the x86 folks on notice here. Trainium 2 is not new, but it did go GA, which was pretty incredible. And they also brought in this Trainium 2 instance called Ultra servers. And that's essentially 64 of these chips with a high-speed interconnect, 83 petaflops, quadrupling memory performance, networking capabilities of a Trainium 2 instance. There was a thing called Project Rainier, which is an EC2 Ultra cluster with hundreds of thousands of Trainium chips in a partnership with Anthropic. You and I sat down with literally the design engineer, and I think what we can say is that when he said hundreds of thousands, he's like, multiply that by a lot. Okay, I don't know if that's 500,000 Trainiums, Dan. I don't know if that's 600,000.
There was a comfortable. It was more than 200,000.
Yeah,
comfortable.
And and the cool part about that is, the biggest cluster I think now is XAI that has 100,000 nodes, right? Truly amazing. So I'm gonna shut up here and give you some, but maybe we loop back and I can talk again.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way in a 6.5 format we could hit everything. It's just not even within the realm of possibility. I guess I want to think about this through some themes. So you and I had a number of sit downs, and people out there can catch that through the 6.5. But like one of the big themes here was all about the transition from sort of this AI, exuberance to AI practicality. Like, how do we remove hallucinations? What can AWS offer there? What can AWS do to make unstructured data more available and automated for utilization in Gen AI workflows? So I thought that was really interesting. They had, Amazon Bedrock Data Automation. That was a great thing for that exact purpose. They offered a lot of advanced RAG features because, companies that are going to want to implement AI are going to want to use RAG. They're going to want to use knowledge bases, graph RAG. And so they did that with their, their new advanced RAG features. A couple other things that I noted was they were very focused on accuracy in their AI, because this was an AI centric show. I mean, they certainly hit on some other things, but what is it called? Automated reasoning, Pat.
Yeah.
So there's something called automated reasoning, and they're saying that it could catch 100% of hallucinations. I mean, this is what makes Gen AI not work, is that we're still not confident all the time. And the other thing they did too, that Pat, that I think you probably appreciated, I certainly did, was this new idea of distilling models. We keep talking.
Yes, that is a good one. Yes.
Yeah, we keep talking about how we're going to go to smaller models, but how do we get from these largest models to smaller models in a way that is more, I guess that you could say is more fluid. It takes less overhead. And that's what they're doing with distilling models, basically down to only using the size of model and the amount of parameters required for the model to perform within the context of how you're trying to have it perform. And guess what, everybody? When you do it that way, you reduce the amount of energy and the amount of cost exponentially. It's great to run these giant frontier models, and it's really nice to talk about trillion parameters and million GPU clusters. But the average business wants to be able to run on a handful of very small clusters. They want to be able to fine tune, optimize a model, access all their unstructured, structured data, be able to attach it to a model that maybe has very specific use case capabilities that's designed for their business, and then have it perform with minimum hallucinations. And that was a big feeling of what I got. So maybe, Pat, the way I'd almost describe this was the event where AWS was very clear that, yes, maybe we didn't get out in front of AI as well as some other companies. Maybe people think that we're a little bit late to the party, but realistically, from Sage to Q to their new models, Nova models, which, by the way, interesting, Nova versus Anthropic. This seems to be a thing. They're all invested in one and building another. And by the way, separate from Titan. So they still, but is that there is a full suite of solutions for everybody out there that wants to do Gen AI, and it can all be done in Amazon AWS in the cloud. The only other thing I'd say, Pat, is I got a real sense that managed capabilities are going to be very important. And this, by the way, is where I see non-NVIDIA silicon, for instance, starting to take shape. The same way AWS has really done well in serverless to drive to Graviton. Like when the app you just want a fully managed infrastructure solution to run your workload. This is where, does half a second versus 0.2 of a second of latency on a query for a token for a language or, video output change anybody's life? This might be where Trainium starts to get momentum, because where I see them succeeding is when they can write the software for something that's going to be done in high volume. Yeah. That can be done on their software, that can be done at a lower cost. And they were very focused on that. They were very focused that their partnership with NVIDIA is very strong and intact. But you have no doubt that they are going to go down this path. And for these kind of managed workloads, of course, they're going to want to use Trainium. It's going to be just way better economics for the company. So I could go on for a long time. But those are a couple of things that caught my attention, Pat. I don't know if you want to boomerang back on anything here, or we want to jump over to you.
No, they were great. Listen, they were great comments. And I think the reason that both the, all companies have their own models is I think when it comes to potential cost and ownership, but also the potential when models are undifferentiated. Right. And then if they're undifferentiated, then what you want to do is you want to hit cost. But great commentary, Dan. So do you think AWS moved the needle?
Wasn't that what we heard coming in? Matt Garman was saying to the press, looking for some needle moving. I mean, there was certainly a lot of interest. You and I can't tell you how many press calls we fielded. Now the week was a little blurry because of our next topic, but I mean, I think they moved the needle on silicon, but I think more importantly, they moved the needle on services. This is where AWS shines is services. And a lot of these services that make data more available, unstructured data more valuable, databases more optimized. I mean, these are you and I have talked about this endlessly, almost ad nauseum, but Gen AI only works when the data works. And so those solutions to make, to expose the right data to your applications is the key to making this stuff good.
Yeah, man, I got to tell you, I'm as skeptical as ever of Gen AI for enterprise. I'm just going to lay it out there. And this isn't because of the Amazon event. It's us going to Amazon. It's us going to Microsoft, us going to and actually talking to the CIOs and then talking to partners. And it gets back to data, right? So I firmly believe that generative AI is going to be domain specific, and that's not domain specific to the data nerds or the developers. What I mean is inside of, let's say, your CRM system or your ERP system. And that's why I'm wondering, like, if enterprise SaaS is going to make the big rebound, but we'll probably talk about that a little when we talk about Salesforce. So I'm done on this topic.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can roll. There's some reasons to still have some skepticism, a cautious optimism maybe is another way of expressing it. But yeah, all right. So the main event, right? Everybody wants to know what is going on at Intel. I guess only maybe more so than Jaguar's interesting ad campaign was Intel CEO leaving for Thanksgiving and then coming back on a Monday, but not coming back on a Monday on a kind of date marked Sunday. So on the Sunday following Thanksgiving, did Pat Gelsinger retire, resign, leave? Was he forced out? I mean, look, you and I, there's probably more than enough speculation of what we think on the record. I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on that here. There's links in the show notes, CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, our team, ourselves. We've been everywhere on this topic. I'll put the TLDR for everybody out there that didn't look and read everything that we've already had to say. There's absolutely a 0% chance that this was just woke up on Friday after Thanksgiving with too much tryptophan and Pat calls up the board and says, I'm leaving on Monday. Something came to a head. Bottom line is there's a lot of speculation. Some rumors are rising to the surface. We are here to try to provide our best perspectives. We're also not here to give or lend credibility to bad rumors or even unconfirmed rumors. We, of course, as analysts, I think, have earned some right to speculate at times of what's going on. But look, I still believe deep down, and this is pretty obvious from my commentary, is this is a foundry-led capex and investment-led decision of, how do you carry forward on the foundry business? How do you keep throwing this much capital into it? How do you do it without a customer that's not Intel or now named Intel Products, or at least a customer at scale that's not named one of those things? And, I think there's a lot of external pressure for a split. And Pat has been steadfast that is not something he's interested in doing. And so my guess is that has something to do with it. You and I had the chance, I think both separately, to briefly sit down with the new co-CEOs, David Zizner and Michelle Johnston's Holthouse. The meetings are under NDA. So I want to be very clear. There's not a ton. I know we teased out there and everybody want to know, but I did promise to give some perspective. And the perspective that I have is that, like every large company on the planet, there are no options closed off right now. Meaning that, what we're hearing and what we're hearing from the leadership is really business as usual. They're continuing down the path of products in a separate governance model for Foundry. The plan, is to continue to push 18A and to put great products out on 18A, Intel products largely, to continue marching towards that next node, 14A, which has some advantages in areas like mobile. Where Michelle sits on the product side in that new role of CEO of Intel Products, clearly that's people will argue with me about this, but that is a very healthy business. If you actually had the products business if there was no foundry and they just worked with TSMC, and actually we're seeing this right now with Lunar, they're able to put out a very good quality part. And so, the world kind of asked that question. Well, if the products can work with TSMC and put out a part, could they just be another AMD? Could they be another NVIDIA? And so I think that's a question, but let me be very clear. Part of what makes Intel very unique has always been its IDM, has always been its capabilities to build a fully integrated design and then manufacture these parts. And I will stand by my belief that the world, and this is something I took away from the meeting, the world is still believe the world needs a strong Intel, and the US needs a strong alternative to foundry. And so my take is there is a goal to come out with a plan. Now, could it be a spinoff, Pat? Could it be a new external capital come in? I did a lot of research on that, by the way. There's a lot of speculation that they can't split, and they can split. But if they split and they want to keep the CHIPS Act money, they have to commit to doing the exact commitments that they made to get the CHIPS Act money.
So there's no ownership, 51% in there, Dan?
As long as they own new ownership. Now, this is how I read it. I want to be clear because I'm not the attorney. I've not read all the legal contracts. But the way I read my research was that if the assuming partner or the assuming investment group is willing to continue on the exact same commitments that were made by Intel in order to get funding, they can assume it. Now, there are also national security requirements. So it can't be, you can't, Huawei couldn't do it. It couldn't be some Chinese company. And even TSMC, I had people, Pat, ask me, like, would TSMC assume it? And the answer is no. TSMC, it does not work. The whole idea of Intel being the national champion foundry was that Intel would be a US-based company that would add leading-edge capabilities, that would manufacture chips for leading-edge fabless designers. That would be Broadcom, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, and AMD. So that if, by the way, anything ever happened between China and Taiwan, if that risk ever went overboard, we wouldn't be without our stuff. And by the way, when I say our stuff, I mean, first and foremost, it's security, it's servers, it's data centers, national security, all that stuff. And then, by the way, Pat, it's cars, phones, PCs, and all the things that we need to run an economy. I think people sometimes don't take the threat of the China-Taiwan situation seriously enough. But even if we have tons of great TSMC fabs here in the U.S., if something happens between China and Taiwan, that will be impacted here in the manufacturing here as well. And also, Taiwan's always been a bit hesitant to give their most leading manufacturing and bringing it here. And I know there's conversations about that. So my take here, Pat, is we still need a solution. There's still belief within the ranks at Intel that they can be the foundry of the U.S. But there's a lot of proof that needs to be done. And by the way, there's a lot of capital that's going to be required. And the CHIPS Act money is just not enough. The $8 billion, and I think that was sort of an insult to Intel. It was an insult to the whole situation that so many dollars went to non-US based companies off the CHIPS Act. And I think that might have been part of what started the sideways relationship between Pat and the board going back to the Lip Bhutan was that, why did Intel not get more? What is not being done? So there's a lot more here. I'm going to let you kind of chime in, maybe boomerang it back if it makes sense.
Yeah. So first off, Pat had a tough job coming in, right? Company was 3 to 4 years behind in process transistor tech, and I would say 2 to 3 years behind in design. To call this a turnaround is an understatement. And Pat had a lot of accomplishments under his tenure, and I do believe that he's the only person on the planet who could have gotten this into motion and gotten most of this over the line, right? He did do 5 nodes in 4 years. I didn't believe that was humanly possible, and it's not just money. He got the money to do this, which, of course, dragged the stock down. So he did this. And, we can debate the quality of 18A. I mean, 18A doesn't go into HVM for another 6 months, but the fact that it's booting silicon is a good sign. Booting is not representative of yield or defect density rate. It's just that it's good. So things could fall off. I mean, things could go poorly. We just don't know yet. And on the design side, there wasn't a single shipping design that was a distributed design. They were all monolithic. AMD had been doing monolithic designs for 3 or 4 years. So those were the accomplishments. Now, the biggest issue that I can put on Pat and the leadership team there was how could they not have a TOPS monster low precision fielded in 3 to 4 years? We saw AMD do this with a lot less resources. Why couldn't Ponte Vecchio be refactored from a high precision flops monster to a low precision TOPS monster? AMD did it, folks. AMD went and they won all of these national labs designs, turned around, and now, it's a $5 billion business. How could Intel not do that, right? So that hangs on his head. The die had been cast before with Ponte Vecchio and on Gaudi. Gaudi is a good product, a very good product. Challenge is that the hyperscalers built their own for the most part. And if they're going to put work into the software, they're going to put it into their own, into their own silicon. Let me move around to the conversation we had with the co-CEOs. While it was an NDA conversation, everything we talked about was very consistent with what came out at the UBS conference. No change on 18A, no change on product roadmaps or timelines. Why the company couldn't come out with a press release and say that, I have no idea. This is probably the worst CEO transition announcement I have ever seen in my entire career. And the only thing that comes close is when the AMD board, the inept AMD board, fired Dirk Meyer from AMD, basically a design god. And why did they fire Dirk? Because Dirk didn't get them into the smartphone business, and the board was stinging that NVIDIA won a couple awards at that year's CES. Made no sense, and I believe that firing Dirk Meyer led to what was what ended up could have been the downfall of AMD, and it went into a very, very dark place. So with that said, hey, 18A and product roadmaps being on time, new milestones hit every week, okay? And this thing could change. I know there's I think in UBS, they talked about a major milestone hitting soon. I didn't look through the whole transcript of what that was, but here is something I am seeing, even though to this day, I have no idea exactly why Intel and the board got sideways. Was it death of 1,000 cuts, right? Was it, I've heard lack of product focus, too much focus on the foundry. I've heard not enough progress on the foundry, and you had laid that out. But with the new management team, I am hearing customer focus, product focus, and hardcore execution mindsets. Could we see a restatement of schedules that say, okay, we only publish 90% schedules? I don't know. Intel did that before. And by the way, Lisa Su, when she came in, she reset everything. And so I feel like we're getting to best products. By the way, MJ is CEO of products. And hey, I've heard some people say, oh, MJ, she's not a PhD. Look at all the product leaders. We've got Lisa Su. We have Jensen, right? And here's the deal. And maybe I'm biased because I do not have a technical degree. If you surround yourself with the best technologists, but you inherently know and have a better feeling of what your customers want than I have, you and I both have a lot of executive communications talking to, you really want to talk, don't you?
No, I was just going to laugh. What degree did Steve Jobs have?
It was an arts degree, I think.
I don't even know if he finished. Anyways, Zuck,
So, Joe, where was I on this? But what I have heard of a criticism of Pat is he just didn't listen to his customers. And I think MJ, what I hear, and again, you and I talk to the executives of all her largest customers. I hear very positive things about MJ, and I want to give this. She deserves a chance to drive products. And to be blunt, I think if she were running products before, we would have a low precision TOPS monster, and versus something that esoterically looks good on paper. So I'm going to give this a chance. Listen, Pat is the only person who could ever get to the company where it is now. And quite frankly, those people who are just casting overall dispersions, you've probably never done this before. Okay. You've probably never worked for a semiconductor company, or you've never worked for a customer of a semiconductor company. Am I passionate about this? Yeah, I'm pretty passionate. Does this give me flashbacks of my 11-year tenure at AMD? Heck yes, it does. Anyways, tune in, hit me on social media, hit us up on social media with any questions you have coming aside of it. But what I loved about our conversation with the co-CEOs it was consistent with the UBS. So, but they just needed to be more direct. Just say it. And I hope they can do this. I mean, their stock is down 16% on the week. Yeah. Okay. I don't need anybody to tell me, 16% on the week. This rollout was a failure.
Yeah. The initial bump, I think people thought there'd be an announcement to follow quickly. I know. And then they took a breath and then they went, holy crap, this is going to be really hard. Now we should be cheering as people, even unless you're short, then you're just an ass. But the point is like, we should be cheering for Intel to succeed. We need competition in products and we need availability and scale in production. And so there aren't a lot of options. And I'm Pat M, little Pat, as Big Pat used to call you. I'm glad you pointed out the accomplishments, because I do think in many ways that the way this ended was probably very unjust to an almost 4-decade career.
That's such a good human. He's such a good human.
Yeah, someone that gave so much of his self to the business. And like you said, people just don't understand the hard decisions sometimes of having to make changes, make cuts. I got asked twice this week in 2 different programs, what would Musk do? And of course, when you're callous and completely callous to these kinds of things, you could go in and cut 50% of the workforce and not blink. That's a different kind of leader. And yes, that probably would drive more returns to shareholders, but cultures matter too. It's not right or wrong. Yeah. Anyways, we could beat this one. This is another one that could be a whole show. We could go for a long time. There's going to be more here. It's not over. And there's a lot of work to be done over at Intel. And I can assure you both, Pat M, little Pat and I, will be commenting a lot on this in the coming days, weeks, and months. Stay tuned. All right, buddy. We got to keep going. These will be a little faster, I think. We got to hit 4 earnings. So we're doing the 7-5 today. Or 5.
We'll go through these.
5 earnings, starting with Pure Storage.
Listen, Pure Storage is up 22% on the week. And after their announcement, they were flying. Was it based on the fact that they did a beat and a raise? No, it was actually because they filled in some of the blanks of this big hyperscaler that they're going to be doing business with. They had talked about this, I think, 3 quarters ago, of this major hyperscaler that they were going to get. They couldn't give details, and the stock didn't move. Right. And this is not to be confused with CoreWeave, but literally in about a year, they will have a gigantic installation in one of the top 4 hyperscalers. So, It could be AWS, it could be Google, it could be Microsoft, it could be Oracle. My guess is that it is going to be Microsoft, but doing a mass deployment with direct flash. So hyperscalers don't like to bring anybody else's infrastructure in. By the way, my second guess would be Oracle, and we can debate this, but I just think this is huge, and the stock market agrees. I mean, is this should this drive a 20x% increase? I don't know, but doing something with a hyperscaler is huge, particularly if they're going to standardize on that storage. I get the feeling that this is going to replace all hard drives. What everybody listening might not understand is that most of the storage in a hyperscaler is on hard drives, right? And this would come in. This is probably QLC, and it comes in and replaces it with all the benefits of density. And this is the thing that people don't fully grok either. The amount of density when you take out hard drives and move in dense SSDs is absolutely incredible. And you can push that power. You can add more GPUs. You can add more compute, right? In the same square footage. It costs you less for energy. So as Charlie said, when I had talked to him, right? Or I guess we talked to him. Did we talk to him at the same time?
We did.
Your choice is you can sign up for more nuclear reactors, which I know was tongue in cheek, but in a way, reality.
By the way, it's really funny that you say that. I had a conversation. I can't disclose who, but a major CEO from a big, and he kind of was saying that at some point the optionality is going to be like build more nuclear reactors or figure out a more efficient way to do this. Because you can't just, everything can't be these big monolithic GPU super clusters. Like you can't power these things, Pat. We have a lab performance business and we're doing some serious AI testing and, just smaller clusters. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands a month in power. In one of our testing facilities, Pat, we're going to be probably spending somewhere around that just to keep the my point is like, so you look at how that scales, because we're not even talking the biggest stuff. We're talking about, what we would call something in the enterprise realm. Where is this power going to come from? So every part of the stack, from software efficiency to distilling models to using the most efficient infrastructure for storage to network to putting AI out at the edge, Pat, all these things are going to be super important if we're going to actually be able to realize this AI thing. And I think at some point we're going to end up getting to the kind of coming to this head on, how fast can we actually implement all this based on limitations that are really outside of what we can do with AI and GPUs and software, but really the infrastructure gap. So I think it's a good opportunity. I mean, Pure, has just been one of those kinds of head down, steady Eddie. They are growing in the hyperscaler, which I think excited a lot of people. But like, let's not minimize all the growth they've been able to accomplish in the enterprise. They've always been a very customer experience centric, easy to use centric. They've made that big hard pivot over the last couple of years to more subscription. One of the probably slightly weaker spots in it was, on Evergreen on their, but it was only slight and it's still showing growth in the right direction. So across the board, it was really good. But Pat, you kind of nailed it on the head. Why are they up 22%? Well, unless they just all the shares rotated out of Intel and into Pure, that's not what happened. Okay. What did happen was people are seeing the light that, when a hyperscaler commits, there we go. Look at that it looks like a little mountain.
Look at that thing.
What, for sure when you see a line like that goes up, it means I'm not holding the stock. That's what you did for sure.
You did pretty well with SoFi and you and your.
Yeah. Well, you know me, I can't invest in anything I really know about. So I'm always in these names that are, it's like the casino, which by the way, like DraftKings, I love that stock because I think people are degenerates.
Yeah. By the way, my policy is I do no direct investing in a company that I've signed any NDA with. So,
Agree. Same. I learned that from you, boss.
hey, buddy.
Where'd you learn how to do that? I learned it from you, Dad. Anyone remember that commercial? Anyways, it wasn't about investing. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. Salesforce, or should I call it Agent Force?
Agent Force.
Agent Force. Now we all know, and we all know it's been an interesting and kind of exciting couple months. Mark Benioff screaming into the X abyss at Microsoft for some areas that do warrant consideration. I'm not going to say right or wrong because I think it's not universal. But the challenge of going as fast as some of these companies are going is the data governance is complicated. And when you try to put generative AI on top of every data set across every platform and make it, there is opportunities to create risk, which, Pat, this goes back to your sort of skeptical comments that you made about AWS, not about AWS, at AWS about enterprise AIs. This stuff's really hard. Like, it is really hard to do this, to get all the data, make it all available, exposed and utilized. And then, by the way, make it all compliant. Because even what you can do here in the US with an agent or with a assistant or a co-pilot or a automation, you can't necessarily do in Europe. You can't necessarily do in other parts of the world. So doing this and then dealing with the sovereignty of data and stuff like this is really hard. But Salesforce and Pat, we've been evaluating this very closely. There'll be more coming out very soon. But I guess the TLDR on the earning is they were okay on they missed on earnings per share. But they beat on revenue and they skyrocketed. Okay. So how does that happen? Right. Well, it happens when you make two claims out loud that people really wanted to hear. The first claim was that Agent Force is on track and the early adoption is strong. Is it another one of the? Yep, there it is. I also don't hold that one, but congrats, Salesforce employees and longs. You are wealthier today than you were before their earnings. The second thing is that you announce is an up guide for the next year. So remember, you and I have had this conversation. I've written pieces and made suggestions that enterprise apps as we know them may be dying. And I'm not pulling back my belief, but they're not going to die. They're not all going to die. What's going to happen is you're going to see consolidation and you're going to see smaller SaaS companies, enterprise apps companies are going to become features. They're going to become deprecated data services that are going to have bigger apps, agent-driven apps that are going to be pointed towards those deprecated data services to do agentic things. I know, really complicated. But the fact is if you think about agents as a bunch of different workers with a very specific set of tasks, and then they need to be orchestrated. So you close a sale and then you need to start a project and then you need to deliver a project and you need to invoice a customer, and the way it goes around, you can have a bunch of different agents doing this. Well, Salesforce basically said people are happy with what they're seeing with Agent Force so far, and that I'm raising guidance for the next full year because we're getting strong traction with Agent Force. That's the rotation. That's the bet. We could pretty much talk about everything else, but that was all that mattered. All that mattered was that people feel that this pivot, this very hard pivot, this very enthusiastic version of Mark Benioff that has been all over social, basically challenging the competition and saying that he's got a better mousetrap, is saying that it's so far, so good, they're on track. And that's why we saw this huge bump this week.
Yeah, just to put some numbers behind that, Mark had said that they had won 200 Agent Force deals, and I think in the first month of availability. And really, this we talked about as a ground transformation of digital labor. And I started to kind of dig into that a little bit. I read the transcript, and one thing that really popped out was their pretty unique pricing model, Daniel. And it's not dollars per seat. It's like dollars per conversation. The list price is $2 per conversation. You can buy that in bulk, but I thought that was really instructive and cool. The only thing that could be better and maybe the Accentures of the world will put a layer on, and charge is charged by the outcome, right? Find a quality metric to be able to do that. But in call centers and stuff like that, even in call centers, they do arrive at a cost per incident. Yeah. And I just thought it was fascinating way to do pricing. And it's funny. I'm wondering if it's cause and effect. The Mark waging war on Copilot, or as he calls it, Clippy, and these 200 deals, or they're just completely unrelated. I have no idea. The other interesting thing that came out on the call was this consolidation into a new core. And to me, this is the back end work that you need between their data platform and then all their front end platforms to be able to more easily move around. It's interesting. I thought they already had this when we went to their Big Tent event a few months back. Maybe that was just a reiteration of that, but I think I need to do and go a little bit more work on that. The way that I think this is going to play out, Daniel, is the first generative AI implementations are going to be inside of specific data domains, right? It's going to be in ERP. It's going to be in CRM. It's going to be in Salesforce automation. It's going to be in inside of HR. And, there's a lot of work that goes into crossing the streams, right? Whoever's watched the Ghostbusters, Crossing the Streams, I have met with so many CIOs out there, and I'm like, give it to me straight. Where's this going? And they're just like, we don't know. We're not moving everything into the cloud. We are not going to do that. We're going to move a little bit of it. No, we're not moving our data. And I think they are going to move some of the data up into the cloud, but it just reinforces to me that this is going to be a domain specific world with some with a little bit of crossing data domains. And I just think that the enterprise SaaS, I don't think they're dead in the water. I think as we've seen with every major transition in IT, everybody tries to get rid of what they had before and do it on their own, but very infrequently does it work out. The public cloud is 17 years old. And Daniel, how much data is still on-prem and on the enterprise edge?
Somewhere around 30, or sorry, on-prem 70 to 75, I believe is the range.
That's right. Are mainframes dead, Dan?
Not if you ask companies that make mainframes, but no, I'm serious.
No.
They're still very relevant, especially in transaction processing.
So it's just like, I think if you have perfect data, you can put an agent, or you can put an LLM on it, and you can do that. But you know what? Nobody has perfect data. It's ugly. I asked one CIO, hey, tell me, couldn't you do this? Just put something on SAP. And he's like, the data schema for SAP, and no, we don't have 27 different instances of SAP in my company. We have one. We've already done the consolidation, but the data is so hard to work off of, it's almost impossible. So anyways, interesting stuff.
All right, we got 3 more. I'm supposed to be on another call in 5 minutes, but we love you so much. I'm going to go a little bit long to take care of our great community, Pat. Let's keep crushing it. Hey, let's go. Let's cook. What's next?
Synopsys, right? Had a beat with record earnings, but Wall Street didn't like the guide. A couple things going on there. I think there was an extra work week in Q1 24 that won't be in Q1 25. I thought it would get figured out the day after. It did not. There was also some skittishness about China. I think the company is taking a very conservative approach to it, as it should. But gosh, the details in the call are amazing. If you want to know about the future of semiconductors and even platforms, go read the transcript, right? Design wins on new technology like PCIe 6, CXL3, UCIe, ADAS, 800 gig demo discussions. Read it. It's pretty amazing. And there's a lot of discussions Sassine spent on alignment with ARM, right? Every product that ARM, even CSS, was discussed and fully integrated. And as we saw from the 50% AWS just on data center, these guys are cooking. Final comment, ANSYS is not a done deal yet. It has passed pretty much every hurdle but one out there. I think it's a huge opportunity. I like to call this the melding of micro design with macro design. And then you sprinkle AI, and it's an accelerant to both. That is the value proposition. It took me about 12 seconds to figure out what these guys were doing and who would benefit between Synopsys and ANSYS. And I think it's going to be big.
Yeah, this one is pretty straightforward. I continue to get asked all the time about who are the other plays in AI? Did I miss NVIDIA? Am I too late? I don't believe there's another GPU that can compete. The software companies are being too opaque. Well, here's a play. I mean, this is really a play. Like, you think we're going to make more AI chips. There's only really, the two EDA companies that drive most of this is going to be Synopsys, is it's going to be Cadence. Synopsys is even more diversified. It's got a very substantial IP business as well. It's got some very advanced AI features that are used to help companies speed up the chip verification design. If you've been following the cycle, remember 3 and 4 year, compute cycles for, data center, meaningful compute cycles now being condensed to 1. And we could argue maybe even below 1 for some things. It's going to come down to having the tools to speed up the process of designing, the digital design RTL, and then of course the actual everything, from verification, which, as we all know, you can get 60 or 70% of the way through verification very quickly, but getting from 70 to 100 is very important. And of course, getting those highest yields is always going to be, we see how even BS rumors about low yields can crush stocks. Well, companies like Synopsys are an enabler for this. So I really like the company in its periphery to all this AI action, similar to ARM in some ways and different in some ways because it's actually diversified. I do think the one thing that sort of struck the company, Pat, besides China, is just people kind of waiting on this ANSYS deal. There's been a bunch of sort of concessions made over the last year. These big deals are hard, and this is just one more indicator of, how do bigger deals get done? Is the Trump administration going to change anything? Pat, you asked me a great question the other day, is even if the US has friendlier rules, what does that do the rest of the world, where you can't get anything out of England or the UK? You can't get anything out of China right now. Getting China to approve anything is really, really hard. So all these things is the big deal environment back on? Is it game on in tech? And I think the answer is still very touch and go. So it was a good quarter for Synopsys, but there are still some question marks around it. I really do like it as an AI play because of you just can't make chips without them. It's just not going to happen. All right, Pat. So let's hit a couple more. Marvell. Pat, I think you and I, by the way, we're going to be next week in San Jose area, Santa Clara, wherever Marvell is. And we're going to be getting their update. Now, this is a company, Pat, that was really, really crushing it through the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, as some of the kind of legacy semiconductor areas like, communication started to fall, industrial it started to fall, traditional networking, they really kind of saw a somewhat sizable downturn. Well, guess what? Marvell is back. Pat, show the picture.
I'm getting it. Yep.
Okay, yep. I'm just waiting for you to pull it up so I can look at another eye-watering cliff.
Eye-watering cliff that you and I cannot participate in.
We do not participate in. But look, we can talk about all the different parts of this business. This is very straightforward. This company is one of two in the world right now that is meaningfully enabling the design and build of XPUs, or what we all like to affectionately call custom AI chips. They've been talking for a number of years about cloud optimized silicon. This was what they were talking about. Now, an announcement this week about a partnership with AWS was out there. If you want to speculate, of course, they never really fully say who's making chips for who, but if you heard about, maybe there were some new chips that Amazon announced, or future chips, as well as current new ones that are going into high volume and being utilized by Amazon. There's one called Trainium. I think it would be a fairly safe bet that there's an influence and some sort of alignment with the company that we're talking about called Marvell. And this is really, really exciting. So you look over the course of a year, how has Marvell basically found its way back? Its core businesses of 2 years ago haven't found their way back. But what they've been able to do through accelerated data infrastructure and cloud optimized silicon is basically double revenue in a year in their data center end market by being one of two companies able to provide the key support for all these hyperscalers. And by the way, other companies interested in building homegrown silicon. And this is a trend that's only going to continue more into the future. So you saw them go from 556 million in this same quarter 1 year ago to 1.1 billion in revenue in this same space. Now, we've heard the numbers from Broadcom in the area of $10 billion a year of custom AI silicon, 10 to 12 silicon and networking. Well, in some ways, you can kind of think of Marvell in many ways as a mini Broadcom. And I know they wouldn't necessarily appreciate that exact vernacular, but I look at it more as the opportunity. So you look at all the hyperscalers, all the demand for custom silicon, and it's not just AI chips. It can be network offload. It can be all these other important chips that you're hearing these cloud providers build that are used to enable them to build their own infrastructure. Marvell is going to be aligned in a lot of areas for connectivity and, of course, for compute. So, Pat, I know there's a lot of other numbers in there, but that's my read on this. This was all about that data center number. And it looks really good. The AWS partnership, very promising.
Yeah, not a ton more to add. What I'm going to do is try and simplify this when it comes to the AI. They operate merchant, of course, but increasingly this custom. And think of Amazon and Microsoft, and think of Marvell as driving that forward. And by the way, it's XPUs, but it's also custom networking and custom security. I believe that the Microsoft announcement last 2 weeks ago had a Marvell custom HSM chip, in addition to them being behind Maya and possibly Cobalt. On AWS, yeah, Trainium 2. Think about in the future, 50% of the new CPUs coming into AWS are Graviton. Imagine if 50% of the new AI acceleration across training and inference are going to be Trainium. And by the way, I don't think there's going to be new inferentia. For those who are counting Trainium, Trainium 1 was also Inferentia 2. We did not hear an Inferentia 3 come out. I do believe that they're going to be focusing in on one chip. But imagine if 50% of that went to Marvell. And there was a press release right before reInvent that talked about the continuation, the lengthening, the strengthening of the strategic collaboration between the two companies. I think I'll end this just by saying I think the best is yet to come with the company. And there's two companies who can do what they do: Broadcom and Marvell. Right? That's it. It's much better to have two competitors in a gigantic market and a growing market than having 10.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And like I said, these are another kind of, as I said, with Synopsys, another really interesting periphery play, but they're not in peripheral, just a really interesting play on AI. So we have we're down to the last one, dude. We did it. You remember when this was supposed to be a 30-minute show?
No, it was boring. It was bad. It's a better show. We can
better show when we go longer. I think next year, actually, everyone out there, let us know. Do you want Pat and I to go all Rogan? Do you want us to do 3 hours on Friday mornings? Because I'm thinking of traveling less and just potting more. I don't know. What do you think? 3 hours, everybody?
Yeah.
Text us. Let us know. You want 3 hours of us just rambling on about tech all morning? And if you're going to be mean, just send your tweets to Pat. Care. All right, let's wrap up here, buddy. We both got to chat to CEO Antonio Neri. HPE, are they growing? They're
growing. Yeah, they are. By the way, in the right places. So
this one's you, buddy.
Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, folks. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, HPE.
We went to 7, so now we're all confused.
I know. So HPE knocked out cranked out a real banger. I mean, record revenue, record operating income, big cash, with a solid guide in there. And by the way, this was tough in the sense that they had a total freaking banger last quarter. By the way, for the week, HP's up 12.5%. Here's another stock we can't invest in, and we can all cry about. And what are investors looking for? I mean, listen, GreenLake and as a service is important, but what investors want to see is what are they doing in AI? So servers related AI up 32%, $4 to $4.7 billion with increased profitability. I had a conversation with Antonio Neri, as I think you did, and he talked about an improved mix, services, and some pretty good timing. AI systems, which is this kind of catch-all for everything they do in AI, including networking, up 16% to $1.5 billion and a $3.5 billion backlog. Hybrid cloud up 18%. And this is what I would consider a lot of their software, a lot of their storage is embedded in here. Edge off 20%. Listen, that entire market is in the toilet, right? Edge is not doing well, and it will come back, but it's just not a whole lot going on. There's not a whole lot of carrier investments. Edge investment has moved to more consolidated AI investment for this round. So I always like to say, hey, is it market inflicted or self-inflicted? GreenLake ARR, 48%. I mean, GreenLake is doing well.
Was that it? Are you done? All right. Yeah, no, I had three things I think that really drove it. And look, this is never going to be a parabolic type company. It's very much a steady as she goes. And, it's been a steady hand by CEO Antonio Neri. He really hasn't wavered from his strategy. And at times, it feels like, those little memes are like poking it with a stick at the stock, like do something. But I mean, it's been nothing but consistent. I mean, two things that he'd really committed to when he came in. One is GreenLake, growing that business and moving everything as a service. And I think that's been prudent. I mean, multi-billion-dollar, bigger, rapidly growing RPO, 48% growth. And if you look at that, how that growth compounds over years, you're going to have a really, really healthy subscription business, which, by the way, the competitive OEMs have really not done. Now, I know you can argue that like some of the financial service models and the way some of these other companies do their services, they do have really big numbers. They're really big companies. But I'm talking about really kind of like an on-prem SaaS offering. They've done a really good job of executing that vision and scaling. And Pat, look, these kind of managed full stack, out the box, AI, data solutions, this is something that they're really doing well. I think they're doing well and they're making available and they're sort of, choose your own adventure in terms of size, as long as it's within these 4 parameters. And so the early indications are the partnership with NVIDIA is going well. They only launched it in September. They announced it in June at the Discover, but they launched it in September, and the momentum's already good. The backlog is growing really proportionally with other large OEM sellers. And, they seem to be a little bit more focused on high margin. So their margin at HPE has been pretty well protected. The last thing I'll say from Antonio is he was really, really reiterating innovation, that they are focused on not, and that's really through the services and the way they deliver what they do. And the last thing is the Juniper deal, still on track, still expected to go through in January. That was a big one. It was a long one. It's a complicated one. I think that one might play out really well because while Edge Network is somewhat on pause, Pat, enterprise and branch and networking for what I expect to be the future enterprise AI is going to be a bigger opportunity. It's not big yet.
Because it always hits after the core.
Right. And so they're going to, if you kind of want to say that there was a somewhat thoughtful vision when that deal was made, is look, all these workloads, all this inference at the edge and at the branch and lower power, all the stuff we talked about earlier is going to be required to be done on this kind of enterprise infrastructure. So, it's got a long tail. It's got some good opportunities, some good growth. Pat, was a good week. So I'm cooked. We said, let's cook. I'm fully cooked. I don't know about you. Hope all of you out there enjoyed this episode. We covered a lot of ground, and we'll be back next week. You and I are off to San Jose. We're going to be at a Lattice event, developer conference, Lattice Semi, FPGAs. Come on, where are my nerds at? And then we're going to be at Marvell's Industry Analyst Day. And then you and I are, we're heads down. There's a lot going on. We're planning for CES. We're planning for Davos. 6.5 is going to be at Davos this year. Yeah, baby. But somewhere in between, we're planning a skiing trip, right? We're planning a skiing trip.
It's a bestie trip, folks. If you disliked pictures of Dan and I embracing and doing things together and dressing the same, definitely stay off the internet starting December 26th.
Yeah. Well, all I'm going to say is that, those of us that you and I did dress the same accidentally on 2 different of the 3 days this week.
So weird, dude.
It was super weird. But the marriage really is starting to play out.
It is. No divorce this year, folks. We're going to go into 25.
All right, everybody. And that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. Be part of our community. We appreciate all you. Time to say goodbye. See you next week.